Let's look at variance and fiscal year in this presentation. Variance is a three-step process used to assign particular properties to one or more objects. So let's look at the three steps in defining a variant. First, you define the variant, that is giving an ID for a variant and a description. Then you determine the values for the variant. This way you assign the properties of that variant. And the third step is to assign the variant to an object. So that's defining the variant, determining the values, and assigning the variant to an object. So we'll see in more detail with an example of a variant in our next few slides. But for now, we just have to know its variant is defined by three process steps. And what is the advantage of having a variant? Well, the main advantage is maintaining the properties of the variant, which is common among several objects. That is basically the maintenance. For example, you can have a fiscal year variant from January to December, and all the company codes which have a calendar year of January to December can use that same fiscal year variant. That eliminates the hassle of creating a single variant for each company code. So just by having one variant, all the company codes can use that same variant. So just like we mentioned earlier, the main advantage is to maintenance of that variant is easy when it's just one variant and all the objects are using that same variant. Let's look at it in more detail with some examples in the next few slides. A fiscal year for a company is its calendar year for its financial reporting. For example, in some countries like Australia, their financial year is from July to June. So all the companies comply with this and they produce their financial reports based on this fiscal year, which is from July to June. Now going forward in SAP, we will use the terminology fiscal year instead of financial year. In USA, the fiscal year is from October to September. But in Germany, the fiscal year is the same as a standard calendar year, which is from January to December. So you can define the fiscal year as a variant depending on your country's requirements or your company code's reporting requirements. Usually, you will have 12 posting periods in a year. Now the word posting period might be new for few people. It's just basically the same as a month. So instead of saying 12 posting months, in SAP we'll be calling it as 12 posting periods. So we'll be using the terminology period going forward instead of month. Just like I'll be using fiscal year instead of using the word financial year. So in SAP you can have up to 12 posting periods for a fiscal year variant and 4 special periods, maximum of 4 special periods. You can even have just one special period, or you can have just the 12 posting periods without any special period at all. So what is this special period? When you have your company's reporting, after every quarter or every half the financial year or even at the end of the year, you might be having to do some adjustment postings. For example, you might have not included a vendor's invoice or some taxation calculations. There might be some plus or minus gains or losses in some certain transactions which have not been captured in that relevant month. Then you can post all these adjustment postings to a separate period, which is called a special period. So you can have up to maximum of 16 periods in SAP. 12 for the standard calendar months and 4 for special periods. Now how does the system know which month you are in or which period to derive from? Well, the period is derived from the posting date. A posting date is a field in SAP where you actually enter which day you need this transaction to be posted. For example, if you have a calendar year from January to December and you enter a posting date as 25.02.2017, then the system will derive the posting date. The 02 means February. So system will know the posting period is 2 and it's in February. So period 1 is January, period 2 is February. So basically the posting period is derived from the posting date. Now we look in more detail regarding the types of fiscal year variants you can set up in SAP. Now I put this very important icon over here because usually you get asked a lot of questions regarding this, and it might be confusing for a few to remember the different type of fiscal year variants you can set up. So I have put this chart up and I will try to explain it and make it easy for you to understand. The fiscal year variants can be two categories: year independent or year dependent. It's also called year specific. Let's look at the easy one, the year independent. If you have a standard calendar year reporting, which is from January to December, just like we saw for Germany, then it will be the calendar year variant. But if you have a non-calendar year financial year reporting, like July to June, April to March, October to September, and so on, then it's called the non-calendar year fiscal year variant. So fiscal year variant has two different types: independent, dependent. Independent has two settings: calendar year and non-calendar year. Now let's come to the year dependent fiscal year variants. Here also you got two different settings. For example, if you only want to have a certain number of days in a month, like for example, you just want to have 29 days in January, 26 days in February, and so on. Now why would you want to do this? Because in some companies they might only want to post up to the first 29 days, or they might want to have the last few days of a month to post the adjustment postings. So they'll only open the periods to have only a certain number of days. In this scenario, your posting period dates are different from a standard calendar year. Then it becomes a year specific fiscal year variant. Another example is you might have a shortened fiscal year. For example, your company's financial reporting is from January to December, but you're going live in October. So you only have 3 months left in this financial year, and next financial year you want to start a new financial year from January to December. So just for these 3 months you can have a shortened fiscal year. So you'll only have 3 periods in this particular fiscal year. So how to identify if a fiscal year variant is going to be year independent or year dependent? The easiest way to remember is, if anything is less, for example, you have like January 29 days or February 26 days, March 30 days, anything which is less. So if you have a shortened number of days or you have a shortened number of periods, it's a year dependent fiscal year. So again, let's try to remember this. Fiscal year, you can have two different type of fiscal year variants: 1 year independent, 1 year dependent. Independent means you can have a standard calendar year with 12 months or a non-calendar year with 12 months. Year dependent means either the dates are less in a month or the periods are less in a year. Then it's a year dependent fiscal year. Let's create a fiscal year variant. So to create in SAP, you got to come to the customizing menu. The path is financial accounting global settings, ledgers, fiscal year and posting periods, and maintain fiscal year variant. The short transaction code for this is OB29. So let's execute this transaction. These are mostly the predefined fiscal year variants already given by SAP. For example, if you want to create a fiscal year variant as a calendar year that is standard from January to December with 12 posting periods and 4 special periods, you can use the K4 fiscal year variant. This has already been provided by SAP. So you don't have to create a new fiscal year variant. And if you want to have a calendar year with 12 posting periods and one special period, you can use a K1 fiscal year variant. Now if you want to create a fiscal year variant from a calendar year between July to June, then you got to create a new fiscal year variant. If there's already one existing, you can just copy. But for this example, let's try creating a new one. So click on New Entries and give it an ID. So I'm going to type in July to June fiscal year variant, 12 posting periods and 4 special periods. Now it's not a calendar year and it's not a shortened period or shortened fiscal year or shortened date, so we're not going to click any of these settings. We're going to put in number of posting periods 12, number of special periods 4, and save your entry. Again, a transport request will come. We'll just continue with the same transport request number. Okay, now the fiscal year variant has been defined. Now we need to mention to SAP when are the periods going to start from and when the new fiscal year is going to start for this setting from July to June fiscal year. So highlight this and click on periods. Okay, click on New Entries, and we are going to define all the 12 months from January to December. And we need to mention the number of dates, number of days for each month. For June 30 days, July 31 days, August 31 days, September 30 days, October 31 days, November 30 days, and December 31 days. Now you need to tell the system to start the fiscal year from July onwards. So my first period should be from July, second period in August, third September, fourth October, November should be my fifth period, December should be my sixth period. And because my fiscal year should start from this July period onwards, in the column year shift, I need to put +1. So for example, if you are in the calendar year in 2016, your fiscal year from July onwards should be your 2017 fiscal year. So that's why you put the year shift as +1. Then the current months of this calendar year will continue as normal. And you'll be putting it as 0 over here. Okay. So again, from July onwards, my new fiscal year should start. So that's why I'm putting +1 from July to December. And that's why my new period is also starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for this year, the January to June is my old fiscal year. So I'm going to leave it as 0 and save the transaction. Oh, I made a mistake over here. That's why you got a invalid message saying that the fiscal year the number of dates in April should be 30. Okay. Then click on period text. Okay. This way you need to define the period text. This is basically you're defining in each language. For example, in English, and for each of the 12 periods, a short text and a long text telling these are the months of the year. This is mostly for referential purposes for the users. So EN is short for English, the language. You can define in many different languages as you want. So a short text you can have up to 3 characters. And a long text you can give the full description. So as you can see, I filled up all the details for all the 12 months, given the short text and the long text for each period. Now this is your standard 12-month period for a normal calendar year. You're defining all the 12 months in the year, giving a short text and a long text. But in our scenario, we are going to define our fiscal year from July to June. So my period 1 should be July instead of January. So I'm going to take the information from here and paste it here. Similarly, I'm going to take the information from January to June and paste it here. Now you can see how I have changed the period and the description. Because for this particular fiscal year variant, I want to start my fiscal year from July to June. So my period 1 should be July. Now this is mainly for the user identification. So when you drop down, the users are going to enter any data or they want to execute any transactions. When they select period 1, automatically the system will give a description as July. Because now they must be knowing that they are in the July to June fiscal year variant. So we're going to, as you can see, from 1 to 12, I have changed the format. January is my 7th period, July is my 1st period. Now I'm going to save the transaction. Data was saved. Now you can click on the back arrow, again behind, and you can see your fiscal year variant would have been saved over here. July to June fiscal year variant, 12 posting periods with 4 special periods. As you can see, the periods starting from the 7th period is July starting with the new fiscal year starting, and your period 1 is actually July. So this is the link between the period over here where you mentioned period 1 and the period 1 text is July. And you can save the transaction and go back. So that's how you create a fiscal year variant. Now let's see how to assign the fiscal year variant to a company code. So that is the next transaction over here. You can also use the short transaction code OB37. So let's execute the transaction. Then choose your company code. You can either drop down like this, or if you directly know that company code, you can type it in over here. So we have recently created a company code Z123, and we can choose a fiscal year variant. So let's create the one we recently assigned from July to June and save the transaction. And if there's any other company codes without a fiscal year variant also, you will get a message saying that enter a fiscal year variant. If you want to just ignore this message, just click on enter on your keyboard. And again, another transport request will come because this is a new configuration. You can save it. Now you have assigned the fiscal year variant to your company code. The same fiscal year variant can be used by many different company codes. As you can see, ZA01, ZMNM, ZZMN are all using the K4 fiscal year variant. So this is one of the advantages we discussed earlier with regard to a variant, that many objects can use the same variant, and you can just maintain one variant, and the maintenance is much easier rather than having individual fiscal year variant for each company code. And that's how you create the fiscal year variant and assign it to the company code. We saw some examples configuring a fiscal year variant. I've given some of the screenshots for your reference. And we also saw how to assign the fiscal year variant to a company code. Those are mainly the two configurations you will need to know in this presentation. So let's look at the assignments for this presentation. We saw the variants, the three-step variants, the three-step process in creating a variant, defining the variant, assigning the values to the variant, and assigning to a object. You also know the advantage of having a variant is easy maintenance. And we also saw defining the fiscal year variant, the types of fiscal year variants, independent and year dependent. If it's a shortened number of days or short number of periods in a year, it's year dependent. Anything else is year independent. Year independent has two categories, calendar year or non-calendar year. Now for your practice and assignment, please create a fiscal year variant. You can either copy an existing one in SAP or create your own variant. And then assign this fiscal year variant to a company code which you have created.